Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark Stay.
And I'm Mark DeVoe, and we'd like to say thank you to everyone that supports this podcast, and especially this week to Keir Byrne, our new patron. Thank you so much, Keir, for supporting us. And if you'd like to be like Keir and support this podcast and get loads of goodies, pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. Mr. Stay, we've had a busy old week, haven't we?
We have. I went to the London Book Fair, which was great. Bumped into all sorts of people, including all sorts of listeners as well from the show. I saw Karen's story. I saw Katie Baker. I saw all sorts of people. Did a few talks and didn't catch any lurgy. I went to a big major public event and didn't catch anything. Thank you. Hand sanitizer and vitamin C. There we go.
Brilliant. Times are changing. That is awesome news. And we had a fantastic presentation and coaching session on Monday with lots of podcast listeners that join us, patrons that we've never seen in the flesh, so to speak. Yeah. And it was lovely. We had tons of people, and it was so lovely because podcasting's fun, isn't it? But I do miss the fact that we don't get to meet. I mean, I know you get out and about a bit and you get to see people at events, but we know that there are thousands of you out there that allow us to go into your ear holes every week, which we feel very privileged about. But it was so nice to actually see names and then a face, and it's like, oh, that's you. And so thank you to everyone that joined us. It was just absolutely lovely to meet you all, and we must do that again sometime, Mark, because it was a ton of fun, wasn't it?
Really was good fun. Really was good fun.
Excellent stuff. Now, folks, if you have already started the 200 words a day in May, we just want to encourage you, keep on going. This podcast is going out very early, mate. But if you've missed the first, it doesn't matter. You can start from whatever day it is in May for you, but see if you can write from today onwards to the end of May. If you want to join that, go along to the 200 word challenge, which is 200wordchallenge.com. We're trying to encourage people to write as many words as they can, or as much frequency as they can, I should say, in May. So do join in on the fun with that. So Mark, we've got a ton of stuff to get through with Social Media Day. So we're going to dive into this week's guest.
Katy Brent is a freelance journalist. She started working in magazines back in 2005. In 2006, she won a PTA award for New Journalist of the Year. And she's got this amazing dark comedy crime debut. It's called How to Kill Men and Get Away with It. It's perfect for fans of How to Kill Your Family, Killing Eve. And we talk about so much. We discuss writing a serial killer the reader can root for, being fearless and pushing boundaries, and getting a deal without an agent. Oh, and just a little warning, gets a little bit sweary. So if you've got, sensitive ears, then you might want to skip this one.
Or kids in the back of the car, as we know some of you will do as you drive around.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Excellent. Well, let's dive in and listen to the fascinating Katy Brent.
Katy Brent, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
Hello, I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm tickety-boo. Thanks for asking. And all the better. Very bright orange colour of this book. This has definitely brightened our spring here. And How to Kill Men and Get Away with It, which is a fantastic title, but not its original title. We might come and talk about some of the alternative titles at the moment. But this is an absolutely very, very funny, bang up to date kind of book. Tell us how it came about, because I'd like to talk about some of the challenges of making a character like Kitty Collins kind of engaging in the way that it comes from that long line of serial killers like Patrick Bateman and Dexter, and where you're kind of on her side, aren't you?
Yeah, that's kind of the sort of the obviously the idea that I wanted, but also what was going to be the huge challenge with that character. Really, it's very hard to sort of get inside the head of. I mean, she let's call a psychopath a psychopath. She is. But to try and get inside the head of her and yet make her still compelling and I hope likable. I think likable. Quite a lot of people have agreed that she's likable. Not everyone. But yeah, it was a bit of a journey, and it has been a bit of a journey, but it started, I would say, around 2018. I'd enrolled in a Faber online course to do I can't remember the name of the course now. It's writing a novel, and it's basically and it was an online course on how to sort of get the first 15,000 words of your novel nailed, which seemed a brilliant idea to me, because I'd sort of had this idea floating around in my head that I wanted to do, and sort of how I pitched it to the course, because you have to sort of go through an application process. How I pitched it to the course was as a stabby Sex and the City. And my original idea for it was to kind of have, this sort of close-knit group of female friends, but one of them is actually, she sort of, when like a man upsets one of her friends or, breaks one of their hearts, instead of sort of giving her wine and ice cream and, advice, she actually just sort of goes and offs them. So that was the original idea behind it. And I really wanted to create this sort of like, it was the original idea was supposed to be, really pure, quite comedy. But while I was writing it, I think the sort of social landscape really changed. We had obviously the Me Too movement, and it was sort of during the process as well. It was I'd sort of decided that if she was going to kill these men, they had to be quite monstrous in order for us to be able to empathize with the main character. I don't think you'd be able to feel sort of very much empathy for someone who was killing someone just because they cheated on her friend or something like that. So the male characters that become victims are quite monstrous, and that really changed up the kind of tone of the book, really. And then I sort of put it down for a while, just because life, jobs, children, pandemics, yes. All of those things, all of those everyday occurrences. So and it was during one of the I think it was the sort of the second half of, I've forgotten how many lockdowns there were in the end there, but I guess it was the second half of 2020 when I picked it up again and started looking at it again. But this time it was through a much different lens, because I guess there was so much dark news, and there was so much sort of the rates of domestic violence and women being killed in their homes. And all of this kind of thing during lockdown had shot up. And then obviously in the aftermath of that, there were, a couple of horrible murders in this country. And I know over in the States as well, there were, a few sort of, she was just out for a run. She was, so I wanted to kind of like capture that kind of feeling as well, because it was becoming, I think, there was the vigil for Sarah Everard, and it was quite obvious how strong this feeling, this rage that women couldn't even go out for a run, couldn't go out for a walk. I think there was a lot of anger about Sarah's killing, where people were trying to victim blame, basically saying that she shouldn't have been out. And it's, so it's trying to really sort of to capture that feeling. And just so in Kitty, I wanted to create this character who was just almost like the embodiment of this rage, the feeling, that it's women are, it's women have just, it's just. I don't even have words for it. Really.
Well, you've put in the dedication here, you said this is for every woman who has ever walked home with their keys between her fingers. And that weird, and full disclosure, because I've been writing a novel with my wife, and we've written a character who walks home at night, and she does exactly that. That thing of having the key between your fingers like that, just in case, something happens. And it's
and there's so many things like that. I mean, I remember there was something going around on I think it was Twitter, which was, it was basically how not to get killed. And it was like, how about people just stop killing? There are things like, have your keys between your fingers. Don't wear your hair in a ponytail if you're out running, because apparently that's a grab. It's easy to grab if you're going to park your car and you're alone, park it under a street lamp, so you've got the light. And it's like all of these things that you like as a female you've got to consider, just going to the shop or and it's a lot, and it's just
Yeah, I remember recently there was a commercial, I forget what it was for, but it had a woman jogging, it might have been for training shoes, and she's jogging at night. And I remember social media was like, no way I'm going jogging at night. Whoa, no way.
No, exactly. I know. I remember seeing that as well and thinking, oh, that won't be happening. But it's that, I'm guessing that commercial was obviously designed and made by a male team. But
what?
But yeah, it's that sort of feeling. And the other thing that I was thinking about the other day that was quite interesting as well is that things are becoming more and more keyless. So it's almost like, cars, homes, it's almost like this one kind of weapon or one thing that you could possibly use as a weapon. And that's sort of being taken away now as well, which, I'm sure that would cause Kitty a lot of problems down the road.
Well, let's talk about the capturing that tone, because it is still a very blackly funny, there's a very dark streak of comedy running through it in that American Psycho kind of Dexter tone as well. And as you say, you went away from it, you came back, and this is a subject that people feel very, very passionately about, and you don't want to be too flippant about it. So how did you manage and capture the tone? How did you work on that without crossing a line, or were there no, did you sort of write fearlessly and then worry about it later? Or
I kind of did it fearlessly and then sort of worried about it later. And it seemed to come out quite naturally. There are a few things where I had to sort of pare it back quite a bit because I'd probably gone a bit too far several times, and I was like, "Ooh!" But what the way I look at it is that I think you have to have that comedic feeling to it, because otherwise, without the sort of humour, and I think particularly, I want to go on a different tangent, but I'll try and finish this one first. I think without the comedy of particularly some of the murders, the murders Kitty commits are very over the top, and they're not going to happen. They're not based on any kind of reality. They are quite ridiculous, and I think it without that, it would be just a very, very bleak, unhappy novel about male violence against women. Interestingly, what the tangent I was about to go off on was that the stories about the women. So you've read it, so you'll know that the Kitty targets men who have escaped the justice system pretty much, and a lot of those stories, a lot of the women's stories, are based on real news stories. So the real, there's been a couple of things I've seen online about, glorifying violence against men, but it's completely the opposite of that. It's not completely the opposite of that. That's not right, is it? But it isn't that. It's the stories about the women are based on true stories, true news stories I've read. Whereas obviously, the male killings are very, very much not real. So I think, as I was saying, that it is something, and I was worried about it being flippant because it is such a serious and important subject. Yeah. But I think the comedy, the dark comedy, it just allows you to sort of delve into it a bit more without it becoming just absolutely bleak. And I'm going to say something really quite controversial now, but I was talking to a friend about going to see the play version of A Little Life, and I haven't actually read it. And she'd said to me, "Absolutely not. There's no way I'll go. Have you read it?" And I was like, "No." So she was like, "Look it up and then come back to me," because she said that she'd started reading it and just couldn't finish because it was just it's such a bleak story. Right. And I know it's people love it and it's wonderfully written, but I didn't want to write something that was, I think that as a woman, there's so much of that every day on the news, every single day on the news that is bleak, that there doesn't need to be a book that's equally bleak. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I think by it's one of the things that satire and humor does incredibly well, is it takes really difficult subjects and makes them palatable. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's any less valid. There's a lovely line a few chapters in where Kitty says, "I'm finally doing something meaningful than just posting photos of myself online," which is a really kind of twisted comment on how vapid most of our lives are, chasing likes on Instagram or whatever. But, she's finally found some kind of meaning, which is one of those things, because you used the word likable earlier, and I'm always wary of that, the phrase likable, because it's often it becomes a stick to beat writers with. You have editors or producers say they're not likable enough. Well, actually, I think they don't need to be likable. They do need to be engaging. So with a line like that, you're making them fascinating and twisted and engaging, and not just a one-note psychopath. So how did Kitty evolve? You said that initially she was part of a group, but she's she's very much front and center of this story. Where did she come from, and how did she evolve?
So I had this idea of the stabby Sex in a City kind of vibe idea thing, and I wanted to do, I had in my head a kind of Buffy kind of character, right, who's got this tight-knit group of friends, but then she's out slaying vampires at night, and this was sort of how I envisioned Kitty, and I wanted to call it am I allowed to swear?
Yes, you are. You're allowed one.
Okay.
PG-13.
My very original title for it was Kitty the Fuckboy Slayer. So yeah, it was, as I say, was going to be a lot more lighthearted. But then, so it was just, I think it was just the sort of tone of everything that was around that sort of really impacted on how I wrote her. She's just this, I guess, a creation of modern society that we're all very much aware of, this kind of privileged Instagram star who I think most people are very much pre-pandemic. There were just loads and loads of content producers on Instagram who seem to do nothing apart from travel the world and post pictures of themselves in bikinis and exotic locations. And it was kind of like take and the kind of Love Island, Made in Chelsea reality show type of person. And I remember flicking through some of these Instagram accounts and just thinking gosh, what if one of them had a really, really dark secret behind all of this sort of, ads and hashtag blessed and all of this, if one of them was actually in their basement is a load of bodies or something, that's a twisted mind, sorry. And I think I've said before, I've said in other interviews, I've always loved American Psycho, the book and the movie, and I wanted to I wanted to think about how that would work if it was now rather than the 80s. I think the whole social media influencer culture is kind of like our equivalent of what was then, the yuppie 80s, I suppose. So, so that was sort of how she came about and evolved, really. I just started, and then, there was things I was sort of stuck in watching Made in Chelsea and just thinking, why doesn't she just kill him?
Let's talk about the title a bit, because you mentioned that you've had a little bit of what would you call it, flack or feedback, where people are saying, and I remember seeing that and seeing the other titles and thinking, well, it's quite a provocative title. But then I remembered there was a film made in the 50s or 60s called How to Murder Your Wife, which becomes a punchline of a joke in Fawlty Towers, where Basil Fawlty says he's seen it 6 times or whatever, and we all have a laugh. So did you, how did you get to that title, and were you kind of prepared for the kind of feedback that you would get on that?
The title is probably the one thing we agonized over more than anything. Right. When I pitched it to HQ, which is the HarperCollins imprint that has published it. It was called How to Kill Men and Influence People, which obviously comes from. So, and that was, I mean, I loved that title, but they were worried that it wouldn't necessarily appeal to as across a sort of age group as, you know, I mean, like people sort of my age, your age, slightly younger, understand where that comes from.
Right.
So I think they were more sort of concerned that maybe, you know, the sort of younger Gen Zers might not understand the reference. So we sort of brainstormed a few things, and I really wanted to keep the sort of how to kill men element of it, because, you know, it is basically what the story is about. And so yeah, then we came up with How to Kill Men and Get Away with It, and and ahed about it for a long time, because there was the concern that there would be a backlash. And there have been comments, I think, sort of when it was announced, and it's been out on ebook and audio actually since October, but there's been a bit of sort of comments on sort of social media saying, you know, if this was called How to Kill Women and Get Away with It, there would be an uproar. And yeah, there probably would be, but for a reason. Because, you know, unfortunately, men do kill women and often get away with it many times.
But like I say, there was a film, 1965, How to Murder Your Wife. I'm just looking it up on Wikipedia. So, you know, there's your answer. That has already been done, you know. So yeah. Yeah.
And as I was saying, you know, this is fiction. If you want how to kill a woman and get away with it, you just need to put on Sky News.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I mean about bleak.
yeah. Let's lighten the tone a bit. Let's talk about, because you're a journalist, and we love talking to journalists who become authors, because you know, it's an interesting shift in how you write. What were the sort of the big adjustments? What were the big surprises you found when shifting from journalism to writing a novel?
Oh, just being able to use my creativity again, massively was most appealing thing. I think I've been working as a journalist. I was staff and then freelance. And when I first started, it was back in 2005, and it was for a print magazine. It was for a teenage girls magazine called Sugar, which some people might remember. But it was very much feature writing. So it was, you know, we were writing much more long pieces that we worked on, that were thought through, that we had to put a lot of, you know, there was a craft there. There was, you know, I did a lot of sort of real life stories. So I would speak to teenage girls who'd been through a particular experience, and then write out their story sort of as if it was in their own words,
right.
Go back through it with them and that sort of thing. And there was the ability to use creativity and crafting of a story, and, you know, all of the kind of things we sort of learned in journalism school, really. And I sort of found more and more recently, I mean, I'm not a news journalist or anything like that. I've always been popular culture, and sort of more recently I've written about TV shows. And that's always been amazing for me as well, because pre-pandemic, again, it was a lot of going on set, talking to writers, talking to, you know, the actors, being able to write, you know, really colourful pieces about sort of the experience. And then obviously the pandemic happened, and there was just such a huge shift in everything. It became like it became a desk job, and it became going through people's Instagram and trying to find out, oh, what's Molly May been up to today, and writing something about that, or looking on other, you know, various entertainment websites, and, you know, taking stories that they've got and putting it sort of into words. And it became much more about, as things moved more and more online, I guess, it became less about the craft and more about just getting it out there as quickly as you can. And it just sort of, I just lost all joy for it, really. And I think once you've kind of, you have that feeling about your job, it's
Yes, no, I've been there. It's interesting talking about, feature writing for things like Sugar Magazine, where you're taking someone's story and making it as if it's in their own words. Because How to Kill Men is in first person, so I guess that was a bit of a training ground for you, wasn't it? You're kind of getting into character. Yeah,
definitely. Because I think everyone, pretty much all of those stories that I did for magazines would be written in first person. So that's just a style that comes naturally to me. And with that kind of story as well, it's like we have to, but we're taught to, or you learn to, where to get the dramatic moments in there, how to keep suspense, I guess, depending on what your subject matter is. But yes, certainly. I mean, first person is I find it very difficult to write in anything but, to be quite honest.
Right. So, okay, that's interesting. So once you'd done that course and you'd got sort of the Kitty up and running and the story up and running, let's talk about the journey to publication, because I understand you had it was not a smooth road to publication. Tell us about that.
So I finished the manuscript. I had some mentoring help through an author called Julia Crouch, who's very well known for her domestic noir thrillers. She'd actually been my tutor on the Faber course, and she mentored me through the process of finishing the manuscript and sort of helping me just craft it, because obviously going from writing sort of features, I mean, even back when I was writing the longer form pieces for magazines, even those would be sort of like 800 words, 1,000 words. Going from writing something of that length to 80,000 words is a huge difference. So she was a massive help to me through that process, and then I took it to another author who is a friend called Stephanie Butland, to just do a kind of manuscript assessment on it, read it through. Didn't basically be a beta reader for me, which she did, and came back with some really helpful notes as well. So at that point, I sent it to a couple of males, a couple of men.
Couple of males.
Males. I said it like that.
Males of the species.
A couple of. I was going for male friends, but it didn't come out quite like that, did it? It almost came out with some disdain. Some males. No, I didn't mean that. I sent it to a couple of guys I know, because I wanted a male perspective on it for them to.
Right.
I think I've thanked them in the acknowledgements, and I've called them like my male sensitivity readers, basically, to make sure they don't find it, really offensive to men, because that was the other thing. I don't hate men. That's just, it's, of course I don't. And Kitty doesn't hate all men either. She just hates a particular type. And
yes.
I think that's fair enough. So they read it and was kind of like, it's cool. So I started querying with agents, which didn't go very well. And I did get a lot of rejections and a lot of rejections and a lot of rejections. Some really good feedback generally. But I think, as I've always said, a no's a no at the end of the day. It doesn't really matter what ribbon you put on it.
Were these, did anyone sort of object to the subject matter? Do you think it sort of frightened agents away?
Possibly. And I think there was that. And then I think what happened was, obviously there was the Bella Mackie book, which has done How to Kill Your Family, which has, done incredibly well. And I think that sort of has opened. I mean, at first I was livid about it, because I'd started, as far as I know, I'd started writing mine earlier. I was like, no! But they're not actually that similar at all. I mean, the storylines are extremely different. The characters are very different, but it actually has opened, I think it's opened up a lot of doors that were maybe, I think because it was such a dark period for society at that time, it was like, this kind of book about murders and deaths wasn't what agents were really looking for. I mean, I don't know, I'm not an agent, but I'm assuming that, during this really bleak sort of period of early sort of 2021, which is when I started querying, was, we were sort of well into that winter lockdown, and it was just horrible. And I guess that they were looking for more joyful, upbeat,
uplit,
happy stories.
Heard a lot of uplit and cozy. They were looking for that at that time. Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. So I think that was, and the feedback I was getting was, your writing's really good. This, the character's really good, but it's not what we're looking for, and that kind of thing. And I got to the point where I was like, okay. I'm just going to sort of shelve it for a bit. I enrolled on a creative writing MA at the University of Winchester, which I started. When did I start that? Towards the end of 2021. But around that time, I'd sent it off to just sort of a handful of publishers who had open, and a few publishers will have open submission windows at various points over the year. So I sort of sent it to a handful, not overly optimistically, because obviously of the experience I'd had with agents and stuff, and sort of that was it really. And then I ended up having four offers directly from publishers, which was obviously interesting. And HQ just was so, Belinda Tor, who is my editor for How to Kill Men, was just so enthusiastic about the book and the character, and they just completely won me over. So it wasn't really a competition in the end of who to choose to go with. But I signed my contract. I think it was on the day of one of the first lectures that I had for the MA was still online at that time, but I signed my contract it was a 2-book contract with HQ on that day, and it was like, this is so weird. It's like I've already got a book. It's just like, it wasn't how I intended it to be, obviously, but it was a good feeling. So yeah, it has been an interesting journey, because it's that kind of, if you go down the traditional publishing route, I think you're always being told, you need an agent, you must have an agent, it's so important to have an agent, and such a lot of on the online courses and the advice groups and newsletters you can sign up for, a lot of space is given to your pitching package, and I sort of did it without that. I've done it the other way around, and I do have an agent now, who is Ewan at AM Heath, who kind of took me on, even though I was already in a 2-book deal, and knowing I'd signed all the rights away because I wasn't quite sure what a contract was. I was just like, yeah. So, I mean, and that's kind of like, having someone who's got the faith in you and on the back of sort of one manuscript, really, who's willing to sort of take you on and not make any money out of you for a couple of years, is actually, for me, that was a huge boost, because it was like, okay, I must be quite good, I guess.
Absolutely. So you mentioned a 2-book deal there. What's coming next, Katy?
So the second one is it's dark. It's a dark comedy. It's quite different. The main character is very different. She's a much more of your sort of everyday woman. But there's still a lot of the themes of feminism and violence against women, that kind of thing going on in there. But it's a murder mystery. So it's this character who's basically trying to sort of get around it without giving too much away, who's killed someone close to her, but she's also sort of tackling something else, which is kind of a huge issue for women. This is so vague.
But tonally, is it similarly sort of twisted and funny and?
Yes, it's still got the same sort of dark humour, and I think the main character Molly she's very different from Kitty. She's much more relatable. She's much more, as I say, sort of every woman, but she has sort of got the same sort of slightly jaded and world weary outlook on life, but for completely different reasons, which become clear. But yeah, it's still it's not. It won't be as controversial. And some reviewers, some people who've left me reviews on Amazon will be very pleased to know that I've actually spoken to a police advisor on this one.
Right. Okay. Right. So did they pick up on a few things? Is that?
It's made me laugh. I mean, I've tried to sort of stay away from reviews as much as possible. I mean, it's almost impossible to not read them, but I've tried not to, because, it's just that human thing, isn't it? You can have like 9 nice ones, and it's that one that's not nice that will keep you awake at night. There were a few sort of ones that they've accepted this sort of that she's a vegan serial killer. They've been fine with that. Fine with the fact that she sort of inherited a meat production company, Handley, to get rid of the bodies of men twice her size. However, they've not been very happy about the fact that there's a lot of CCTV in London, and I haven't mentioned that.
Well, actually, I mean, weirdly, again, I've been looking into this for something I'm writing on, and most CCTV is useless, absolutely useless. It's actually very difficult to get hold of it. But anyway, that's a debate for another day. Well, look, whatever's coming next, Katy, we're really looking forward to it. And thanks so much for speaking to us today. I hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. Oh, where do we begin, Mark? I mean, there's so much to go through there. I love this idea of tone and satire. This idea of how do you, because it's a fine line, isn't it, between satire and humor. And actually, depending on where you are in the world, one thing I've learned moving to North America is British humor, for example. Sometimes there's different types of humor in different parts of the world.
Humor doesn't really travel.
It doesn't travel. I sometimes crack a joke and people are like, what?
Yeah. It's it can be really, really difficult. It's something you can get really, really wrong. And I think with this book in particular as well, you're dealing with murder and sexism and misogyny and misandry and all sorts of stuff that really pushes people's buttons and can rub people up the wrong way. But I think. And she talked about she was worried about a backlash. She was worried about the reaction. But I think when you, certainly in your first draft, absolutely in your first draft, the one that is only for you, you have to be completely fearless. You have to write the stuff that you think is going to get you cancelled. You have to write the stuff that you think is going to, have people clutching their pearls or whatever and getting upset. And then step back from it and go, okay, is there anywhere here that I've gone too far? And this is where you get, trusted beta readers to come in and look at it. And I've done this as an editor and a consultant. I've had, tends to be a lot of middle-aged white men who do this, who send me stuff and go, have I gone too far? What have I done here? And very often their fears are completely unfounded. You go, no, it's not you saying this. It's the character saying this. This person is a villain. They're supposed to say this terrible thing. So you can keep that in. There is a delineation between you and the character. And of course, with Katy's book, she's writing in the first person as well. So it has that immediacy, But, writing satire, don't be afraid to exaggerate things. Don't be afraid to go, Katy's writing in a tradition. I mentioned the Dexter books, the Dexter serial killer books, which were made into Dexter Morgan that made it to it. Yeah,
Netflix show.
It was FX. It was FX, and written by Jeff Lindsay, who I met because we published them when I was at Orion. And the books they really push the boundaries, and he's completely fearless about it. So why shouldn't Katy be as fearless as Jeff was, And it's this thing: satire takes the everyday and makes it seem abnormal or exaggerated or bigger, and it's subversive, and it takes the mickey. And, it tries to provoke that kind of wicked laugh that makes us look at life in a different way. But it's really hard because it doesn't travel. You worry about offending people. And the other problem I have as well is publishing is very nervous about stuff like this, because publishing doesn't know what's funny and doesn't know what's going to make people laugh. And so what's going to change within 12 months when the book actually comes out from when they decided the title, because things are moving so quickly now. I feel in society, right? Absolutely.
We're in the middle of such massive transitions on so many levels. I mean, look at what's happened in the last couple of years with the Me Too movement. I mean, you go back a few years and none of that was being talked about, and yet in the last few years there's so much focus on it, and there's been so much positive change as a result, which is brilliant. But it's a really hard one, isn't it? I mean, in fast moving industries, fair enough, but publishing's not exactly the.
It's not Speedy Gonzales.
It's not Speedy Gonzales in many, not traditional publishing. I mean, we know indie authors that can write a book and it's out the next week. But it's an interesting one. One thing I find interesting as well, being in North America, we get a lot of the British comedians on Netflix.
Yes.
And there's certain comedians that we know of, mentioning their names back in the 80s, 90s, that they're those kind of comedians, and their routines are no longer relevant in today's world. But it still amazes me just what people can get away with. I mean, and how kind of like incredibly funny and shocking, and it's this kind of morphing. It's this morphing world of, we can't let satire and comedy die, because it's super, super important.
No, I think that the one rule with comedy is it funny? Now, I know that sounds glib and simplistic, but if it makes you laugh, it's funny. Now, you may take pause after laughing and go, oh, should I have laughed at that? Well, but that's a good thing, because suddenly you're thinking that's humor doing what it's supposed to do. Humor, yes, it's supposed to make you laugh, but the good humor is thought-provoking. It makes you step back and go, oh, let's think about that. Should I have laughed at that? Am I laughing down? Am I punching down? Or is there something else behind it? Or is it a reflection of this character? Because very often a comedian will take on a persona of a character that's not really them. So it's... I could talk about this all day.
It's a rabbit hole, isn't it? I do wonder whether it's, if it makes you laugh, but if it's targeted at someone or something, if it would make that group laugh.
Well, that's the concept of punching down. That's the idea that you're taking people who are already subject to humiliation and just making it worse for them. In which case, if that's the case, it's not funny, because if you have a kind of a conscience, you'll know that that's not funny. But if it's making fun of people in a position of privilege, or if these are people who are in a kind of entitled position, then maybe it is funny, because that's what satire pokes fun at power. And you look at certainly the UK in post-war Britain, you had shows like That Was the Week That Was, and people like Jonathan Miller and Alan Bennett and Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, Peter Cook especially, very anti-establishment. They were poking fun at the people who won the war. Imagine how controversial that was at the time. It's difficult for us to see it now, but they were having a go at people like Churchill and the establishment, and the people that the perception was they had won the war for us, so we should all doff our cap and move on. And they were saying, actually, no. Things have got to change. What did we win the war for? Was it just to be, business as usual, or do things have to change? So satire will provoke people. And, we've always said on this podcast, whatever genre you're writing, no matter what your tone is, you're never going to please everyone. You are going to upset people. There are going to be people who don't like what you've written. So I think as long as you accept that and are willing to roll with the punches when people don't like your stuff, and we'll get on to reviews in a minute, I think that's next on the menu. That's all part of being a writer. So I think if you're sitting there if you're one of these people go, well, you can't say anything these days. Yes, you can. You can say absolutely anything you want, but it does come with consequence. There are people out there who are going to be upset by things, and you're just going to have to accept that. That is part of the job of being a writer. It's part of your responsibility and accountability of being a writer, is sometimes you're going to say stuff that people doesn't like. That was almost a grammatical sentence. You're going to say stuff people won't like, So it doesn't matter how safe you are. I mean, you could write the coziest crime with no swears, and, someone will be offended by it. Someone will find something in there to be annoyed by, So it comes with the territory, I'm afraid. It's just goes from one extreme to another.
Fantastic. Now, let's move on to reviews as well, because there's something Katy talked about, and something we've all experienced, I believe, in life. If you've ever put anything out there in the world where there is any kind of star rating, so it can be measured, there will always be that review. No matter how many good reviews you get, there'll be that one review that you just can't shake, and it just sticks with you, and you start having conversations with that reviewer in your head, and you talk about how could they be so cruel and mean, and I spent so much time writing this book and they spent 2 seconds writing about how it didn't work for them. And it is, I kind of think of it as like one bad apple review. It's like the idea is that you could have book of the month, you could have 50,000 5-star reviews for the most amazing things said about your book. But if there's one scathing review that absolutely is like a dagger to the heart, why do we do that as human beings? Why do we get so focused on that one voice that what are we masochists? I don't understand what the concept is within human psychology that we get so hung up on that. But we all do it, don't we?
Oh boy, do we. I mean, we've had lovely reviews from Welcome. We had lovely reviews. I remember for Robot Overlords, Kermode said nice things about it. All sorts of people liked the film. But the only one I can quote, the only one I can remember is a 2-word review. Someone called it Dr. Pooh. One, it cracked me up, and two, it's just nearly 10 years later, it's the one review I can remember. So they do, and let's dig into it. Let's figure this out. Because is this because we're trained to remember criticism? Is it because we're told, from school onwards, we remember the "see me" comments or "must do better" and gloss over the praise? Is that why? Is it kind of conditioning that we've gone through, that we only remember the bad things and don't accentuate the positive, as the song goes? I mean,
yeah. I think for me, I think what tends to happen is we feed off this concept that we need everyone to like our stuff. And that part of the issue with that as well is that when people sit down to write a book, they're asking the question, how do I write a book that will please the most people? Because that means a bestseller and the most sales, but it doesn't, does it? It's always the opposite of that. If you try to please everyone, you please no one. I mean, we talked about it last week, didn't you? The 3-star reviews on average, which nobody really wants.
Yeah.
But I was scanning through Goodreads for How to Kill Men and Get Away with It, and there are like 2,000 4- and 5-star reviews,
right?
But there are 1-star reviews there as well. But when you read these reviews, you can see that it just wasn't for those people who gave it 1 star, and the people that loved it. So that's what you want. So I think we almost need to rewire our brains so that when we get a 1-star review, we don't see it as a slight on our ability to write a good story or our ability to be a good author. And honestly, if they say something that's relevant in there, I'm always the first to say, hey, you know what? I could actually learn from that. And I'm going to use that. That's great. Thank you very much for that 1-star review. That's going to make me a better author. But the majority, I think, of 1-star reviews, and I'm just scanning through some now, it's just that it's like, they're into heavy metal and this book's reggae. Right.
Yeah,
and it's just like, it's just their personal preference. And I think with a book like this, it pulls people in and they're expecting a certain type of novel, I think, as well. And if it doesn't hit that trope, then maybe, there's a challenge.
I think there might be an evolutionary thing in this as well. When we were sort of living in caves and hunter-gatherers, it probably was a good idea to focus on the scary things, on the things that, the rustling in the reeds that might be a lion about to eat us or whatever. Maybe it's said this is psychobabble of the highest order here. Maybe there's a link to sort of an evolutionary thing that we just we just look out for the bad things. We have a greater awareness of what we see as an attack, maybe, because I think we do see these things as personal attacks, and they're not attacks on us as an author. Usually it's very rare that the author gets singled out in the reviews. It's usually, I didn't like this character, I didn't like the events in the story, I didn't like the ending or whatever. It's rare that they go, this author is an absolute monster and must never write again.
Well, we've talked about this so many times on the podcast about what makes a good story, or what makes a great story is conflict. And let's be honest, a 5-star review, there's no conflict in that. Is there? It's like, oh, love me. Oh, you've made my day. I started crying when I read your review. It's like all lovely and it's wonderful. Whereas a 1-star review, that's total conflict. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean you didn't like this, didn't like that? I mean, so I think we respond to it because there's just like a good book. We respond to it. I mean, we know it works in stories, so we must understand that in our own lives. So we have the biggest reaction to a 1-star review. Yeah. Because of the conflict involved in it. And then we start having to kind of second guess, like, well, who is this person? And then what have they done in that? Have they written a book? It's like,
exactly.
Who are they to say if you've written 10 books and give me, they're fair enough. But if you've never written a book, if you don't know how hard it is to write a book, how can you do this?
I know. I know authors who will go through Amazon and find the other things that person has reviewed. And they go,
just
well,
to try exactly. Yeah.
Actually,
they create like dossiers on every 1-star. They're stalking them all, and they're like,
this sort of happened to me when we did the Edinburgh Festival in 2003. I did a play there, and we got a stinky review from someone. I can't even remember who it was, and it was my lighting guy, Phil. And if you're listening, Phil, I love you a bit. This was brilliant. Phil looked this person up and started looking at this reviewer's reviews, and he basically said he hates everything. He just hates everything. And and what I realized then, actually, places like the Edinburgh Festival, as much as writers and actors and producers go there to make a name for themselves, it's also where a reviewer can build a portfolio very quickly. You can do 3, 4, 5 shows in a day, write reviews for all of them, and then you can say, go to whoever and say, look, I've written all these reviews, I'm a reviewer. And it is so much easier to write a snarky review than a constructive one.
All right, as well. I've had this idea, Mark. I'm going to put it out there into the world, because I'm not going to do this, but I want someone to do this. So if you're going to do this, let us know. Credit us with the idea, but please do it for all authors out there. I want, how you get like on Airbnb, you get to, the person staying at the Airbnb gets to put in a review of the host and the place. Oh, it was lovely. It was a complete mess. But you know how the Airbnb host can also. You see where I'm going with this? So what we need, folks, is we need the 1starreview.com website, which basically every time you get a 1-star review, you flag it up. And then if they're flagged up enough, anyone else who ever gets a 1-star review from that reviewer can go there and go, oh, well, they're just a 1-starer. That's all they ever do. I can dismiss it. And then we can all just live in peace and be happy.
That is a genuinely good idea, I think.
Right? It is, isn't it? It would absolutely work, because then it would hold the 1-star reviewers accountable to say all you ever do is 1 star. So like, stop doing reviews if all you're doing is you're just angry with the world and you're using authors as your bait.
Exactly.
Right? Like, give them a break.
Negative waves, man.
All right. So folks, I'm putting it out there. First person to go register. That domain is probably even available. I'm not even going to bother looking, but it probably is. 1starreviews.com, maybe. I don't know. Something like that. Build it with AI. Just stick it in AI and say, build me a website and I think it would be a very funny website. And maybe it'd be a place where all authors can share their ones. It can be like a therapy group for authors where we can all get together and talk about, I got this one story review, and we read them to each other rather than put them on Twitter and just expose them that way. I think it's brilliant. Yeah. Anyway, we've got a lot more to talk about, folks. But if you would like to stay with us for the extended edition of this podcast, we're going to talk about provocative titles, and that is going to be very provocative in itself. So you've got to join us for that. And we're also going to talk about how you can get a deal with a major publisher without an agent, which is absolutely bonkers. So we're going to deep dive on that. So, folks, if you'd like to join us and as a bonus, support this podcast as well, and pop into bestsellerexperiment.com/support, sign up to become a patron, and you'll get access to all of the extra goodies, including the extended. So, Mark, I know that there's a ton of wins and celebrations this week. What have you discovered out there?
Oh, it's all good stuff. It's all good, positive stuff after all that sweary stuff we had in the extended version. So let's start with Tracy Montague. Now, this is wonderful. Tracy is a regular in the BXP team on Facebook, and she's also a midwife. She says, I've done a tentative launch for my maternity in fiction consultancy service for writers and editors, and she's added a page to her website. Now, do check this out, because we've had police people on here, we've had experts on here, and you see people getting stuff wrong. I mean, Katy talked about it. She talked about some of the stuff, the police procedural stuff that she got wrong in her book, and people have pointed it out to her. Now, maternity and pregnancy is one of these things where people think they're experts, but they're not. So always get the advice of an expert. And actually, Tracy has done a brilliant article for the Writers and Artists Yearbook about getting maternity facts and right in your fiction. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes to that because it's important to check it out, and also a link to Tracy's services. And I think this is brilliant that Tracy's branched out with this, not least because she said that the birth scene in my film Unwelcome was pretty good, actually, which is high praise indeed.
That's good. Fantastic. Love it.
So do check that out. Congrats, Tracy. It's great if you're an author and you discover you've got an expertise that will benefit others, and it's a service that you can provide that can be you can monetize and make some cash out of it as well. So think about that, folks. Have you got a skill or an expertise that you can offer to other writers? So check that out. Over on the Academy, William Group in Share Your Wins, he says his new book, Unworthy, came out on April 14th. And funny enough, today I saw him putting an unboxing video up for the paperback, which has just come out as well. And he says, and I enrolled in Kindle Unlimited. Since I never advertised his first book, no one read it. But he says he started doing some advertising with the new book. And when he checked his account last night, he had page reads. Now, is there anything sweeter? Now, sales are one thing, okay? You can see that someone's bought a book, but you don't know if someone's actually reading it. But with Kindle Unlimited, you can check in every day and see, oh, blimey, someone's actually reading my book. Someone's written 100. I mean, he says it was 104 pages, which equated to about 40 cents, but it's a milestone nonetheless. And it absolutely is. For a fact that someone in the world is reading your book, and that is really, really exciting. So, William, we salute you. Congratulations.
Absolutely.
First of millions of page reads, we think. Absolutely.
Fantastic.
In the Share Your Wins on the Academy as well, this is from Sandra Hunter. Now, Sandra Hunter is just a keystone member of the Academy. Comes to my craft coaching and surgeries, and just absolutely wonderful, wonderful writer. She says, guys, I'm back from a week-long writer's retreat, and that island of time was just what I needed to get the first draft of my Ellen Ray Book 2 done. Ellen Ray is a fantasy series, and I've had the privilege of reading bits of it, and it's just wonderful. She says, it will need heavy editing, but because I wrote the finale many, many months ago when decided to break what I thought was book 2 into book 2 and 3. Anywho, she says, I liked editing anyway, and cheers to all, and happy writing. So she's finished that rough draft. And I mean, Sandra in the Academy as well.
Honestly, I know Sandra really well. And this is such a massive milestone, because I remember coaching, and this is again, kind of referencing in the life coaching in the Academy. I remember having a very specific coaching session one Monday with Sandra and a group of other people that are all struggling with their books. And it was like that moment of like, I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. And it was, I can't see where to go. And it was like one of those moments where you think, is this book going to stop here? Is it actually going to stop? Right. So the fact that Sandra pushed through is a massive inspiration to everyone out there. If you're in that muddy middle or whatever we like to call it, and you really can't see a way out and you're demotivated and it's just kind of, and this is the story to follow, Sandra's story, because we followed all the way through with this book, and the fact that she hit that first draft end is massive. So congratulations, Sandra, and also to everyone else. I hope that she has inspired you to just push through and keep going, because you can do it.
Got a lovely post from Karen Story, who at the beginning of the year started entering a whole bunch of short story competitions, so many that she kept a spreadsheet to keep track of them. So Karen says, I've been looking through my spreadsheet for short stories to enter this year, chastising myself for lagging behind on entries, when I noticed I had entered the Fish Anthology Flash Fiction competition. Blimey, try saying that fast with your teeth in January, and the results were due out on 10th of April. And she said, it's another one where I wasn't listed, or they would have emailed me, right? So she just went on their website, having decided to be nosy and just see if she recognized anyone on the list. And then she saw her name. She was on the actual shortlist with the flash piece she had entered. She said, I didn't win a prize, but hey, they had 1,100 entries for this competition. I ended up in a group of 37. That's enough for me to call it a win. Glass of wine tonight to celebrate. That's brilliant.
I love it. I mean, firstly, the fact that Karen has a spreadsheet because she's got so many, I think that is brilliant. Like what a great problem to have. I've got so many short stories, but it's almost like, just the fact that she didn't know that she'd been shortlisted, that is absolutely brilliant. So solutions, massive congrats to you, Karen. And she's had so much success this year with short stories. It's been absolutely bonkers. So
brilliant.
Really, really great work.
And last but by no means least, now one of the things we talked about on Monday with our presentation to the Academy and new people was talking about the importance of a newsletter and setting up a newsletter. So this is from the Witch of Whitby on Twitter. Finally, after months of procrastination, they've set up a newsletter so the witchy gossip from the Enchanted Emporium, book news and exclusive content can appear in your inbox like magic. And they said, thanks to the bestseller experiment for giving her the swift kick. So I'm going to put a link, not least because the Witch of Whitby has given the Witches of Woodville a nice review in the past, so do check that out. So yeah, it's so important. Newsletters, so important. Yeah. It's your direct line between you and your readers. So congrats on that. I've signed up. I'm sure many others will too.
Brilliant stuff. Well, thank you everyone for all of your lovely emails this week, and for everyone who's breaking through and getting those milestones, getting those wins. We salute you all. And if you have anything you'd like to share with us, then pop along to the bestsellerexperiment.com website, click on the contact button at the top of the menu there, and send Mark and I an email to tell us all about it, and we'll give you a mention on the show. And also, again, a quick reminder, if you're interested in doing the 200 word a day in May challenge, pop along to the Bestseller Experiment website or the Academy website. We can click and sign up to do that. Mark, where can people find us on socials?
On social media, on Facebook, we're Bestseller Experiment. Twitter and Instagram, we are at Bestseller XP. Come and say hello, message us. Just what I'd love to know is where people are listening to us. Let us know where you're listening to. So if you got to the end and this is, where are you? Are you driving? Are you walking? Are you doing the washing up? Are you walking the dog? That kind of thing. Let us know. Love to know about it. Drop us a line. And we have a contact us button on the bestsellerexperiment.com as well. We've had quite a few emails recently. It's terrific.
Excellent stuff. Brilliant. Well, listen, have a great writing week, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you next week. It's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.